Good evening, everybody. We're breaking into programming right now as the judge in the trial of Justin Johnson, that's the man accused of Young Dolph, has reached a verdict.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder as charged in count 1 of the indictment.
Johnson was one of 3 people charged, but he's the only person on trial right now.
Justin Johnson, also known as Straight Drop, is accused of shooting Young Dolph outside a Memphis cookie shop almost 3 years ago. But today, prosecutors told the jury it was actually a man known as Big Jook who ordered the hit.
It's in, guys. Finally, Justin Johnson, aka Straight Drop, the guy on trial for gunning down Young Dolph, has been found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Now the question is, how bad can it get for him from now on in prison? And besides that, are Young Dolph's people satisfied with how things are going?
I want to say thank you to the jury for their service and decision in this case to bring us one step closer to justice for our family, friends, supporters, and the community that has supported us during this time.
I know some people want it even worse for this guy, but frankly, apart from an outright death sentence, it really doesn't get worse than this. In fact, I'd even say that for many people, a life sentence is worse than a death sentence. At least with the death penalty, it's over after a while you'd have to wither away in prison like a cockroach if it's a life sentence. Oh, and the experience is no fun and games, as some people can testify.
Derek Chauvin, the man convicted of George Floyd. Now, last week, we had told you that he had been seriously injured after being stabbed in prison.
So yes, this is literally one of the worst punishments for this guy. Right now, you really don't want to be Straight Drop in prison. At his young age, this guy is likely going to face such an awful time for the rest of his life. In the gangster rap world, there are very few rappers that were as well loved by the streets as Young Dolph and Nipsey Hussle. So now, imagine how Straight Drop would be received in prison by many inmates who were already fans of Young Dolph.
Highly anticipated trial that really so many, just not across Memphis, but across the country, have been following. Young Dolph, loved by so many here in the Bluff City. Security here at the court, very, very tight.
Let's just say again, you don't want to be in this guy's shoe right now. Truly getting shanked to death on the first day in prison might be an easier way out for him, because you can't begin to imagine how horrible it would feel being a target in prison for the rest of your life, not knowing when or where the next beating, shanking, or just about any other harassment in prison would come from. Nobody wants that. Trust. At this point, it's safe to say that Big Jook probably took the safe way out when he died in January. After being exposed as the actual known mastermind so far behind Young Dolph being gunned down, you can imagine how terrible it would be for him if he was still alive and on his way to prison.
Justin Johnson, also known as Straight Drop, is accused of shooting Young Dolph outside a Memphis cookie shop almost 3 years ago. But today, prosecutors told the jury it was actually a man known as Big Jook who ordered the hit.
Of course, in many quarters, the belief is that even Big Jook was just a middleman for someone bigger, his brother Young Gotti. But that's a story for later. Back to Straight Drop, apparently, the life sentence is not the only charge that he would be sentenced for. A jury made up of 9 white women, 2 black men and 1 white man found Johnson guilty after a 4-day trial. Johnson was found guilty of first-degree, guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree, and guilty of being a convicted felon in possession of a handgun. The jury deliberated for about 4 hours. While he was sentenced to life in prison for the first-degree, Straight Drop would still be sentenced on the other charges in November.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of first-degree murder as charged in count 2 of the indictment. And we, the jury, find the defendant guilty of convicted felon in possession of a firearm as charged in count 3 of the indictment.
So about the Big Jook I mentioned earlier, guys, perhaps one of the most interesting revelations in the trial so far is the revelation that Big Jook promised $100,000 to the suspects for gunning down Young Dolph. Initially, it was only the prosecutor Hagerman connecting Big Jook to the plot, claiming he offered $100,000 to Johnson and Smith to carry out the hit. But during the trial, one of the suspects, Cornelius Smith, also confirmed this.
Do you know who he was trying to get him a deal with?
Oh, Big Jook and him, Gotti and him.
All right. You said Big Jook, is that correct?
Apparently, when the offer from Big Jook came, Johnson, who rapped under the name Straight Drop, allegedly viewed this as an opportunity to align with CMG and further his rap career. According to the prosecutors, Straight Drop was purportedly enticed by Big Jook with the prospect of a CMG signing deal, but only if Johnson executed the hit on Young Dolph. According to Hagerman, Johnson went to Atlanta under the guise of signing a contract with the CMG record company, along with Hernandez Govin, the suspected architect of the shooting. But according to prosecutors, this trip was only a part of the scheme to destroy Young Dolph.
Do you know who he was trying to get him a deal with?
Oh, Big Jook, got him.
Apparently, Justin Johnson took Big Jook's hit. Throughout the trial, the prosecution showed security footage they said showed Johnson at the site. Moments before Dolph was shot to death, two guys could be seen getting out of a white Mercedes in the Memphis footage that was taken outside Makeda's homemade cookies. Hagerman claims that Cornelius Smith, the second man in the video, was seen with a semi-automatic weapon, while Johnson was the one carrying a pistol. Smith is charged in relation to the murder as well. It's clear that tensions had been high throughout the years in the long-standing competition between CMG and Paper Route Empire. With his label, Dolph had made a name for himself in the Memphis rap scene, and word spread that the two groups' rising popularity contributed to an increase in hostilities. The prosecution claims that the battle between Yo Gotti's record company, CMG, and Young Dolph's Paper Route Empire, Puri, was the driving force behind this. According to Hagerman during opening comments in the trial, it was this rivalry that culminated in Dolph's over 3 years prior. Most of us have heard about how the real mastermind of Young Dolph's death is likely Yo Gotti and members of his collective music group, CMG. Everyone knows about the infamous beef between Yo Gotti and Young Dolph. This rivalry goes way back and has had serious consequences. Yo Gotti was Memphis's brightest rap star until Young Dolph came onto the scene. In 2014, after releasing his mixtape High Class Street Music 4, American Gangster, Young Dolph appeared on Sway in the Morning to discuss the project. During the interview, Dolph explained his decision not to sign a record deal with Yo Gotti, stating that he wanted to invest in himself rather than join another artist movement.
That was because of Gotti. You feel what I'm saying? Which I can't do that because I got too much of my own time and money invested in it. You feel what I'm saying? So, like I said,
and I know Gotti respect that because he did the same thing.
Of course, this decision reportedly offended Yo Gotti. Essentially, this was what was rumored to be the root of their beef. On February 11, 2016, Dolph sent a subliminal shot at his Memphis rap counterpart on Twitter, alleging that Yo Gotti wasn't happy with his growing success. He tweeted, "Bro went from being my #1 fan and wanting to sign me to being my biggest hater," referring to Gotti's failed attempt to sign Dolph to his CMG label. In February 2016, Dolph raised a few eyebrows when he announced that his debut album would be titled King of Memphis. Yo Gotti had often referred to himself as the King of Memphis, so Dolph's album title seemed like a direct shot at Gotti. The friction between the two rappers intensified on March 2, 2017, when Gotti's CMG artist Black Youngsta posted a clip on Instagram disparaging Dolph and questioning his claim of being the King of Memphis. Black Youngsta also threatened to slap Young Dolph. He then upped the ante by showing up in Young Dolph's South Memphis neighborhood with a few of his goons, capturing the scene on video while armed with heavy artillery. Despite this, Yo Gotti later claimed that he hadn't asked Youngsta to take these actions. But of course, the beef didn't end there. In fact, the beef escalated as the rappers released diss tracks aimed at each other. But from just rap disses, the situation took a violent turn when Young Dolph's car was shot at multiple times. Fortunately, Dolph was unscathed due to the SUV he was riding in being bulletproof.
Months ago in North Carolina, Young Dolph's SUV was shot at 100 times, but he wasn't in it.
However, he wouldn't be so lucky the second time. Young Dolph was shot outside of the Shoe Palace, and news broke that Yo Gotti was named a person of interest by the LAPD. Sources said that both Yo Gotti and Young Dolph were staying at the Lowe's Hotel at the time of the shooting, and members of their entourages got into an argument that escalated into a fistfight and then gunfire, leaving Dolph wounded. Yo Gotti was charged with attempted murder in connection to the incident, but the charges were later dropped. However, it seems the streets never forgot, as Yo Gotti kept losing people around him from that day on. By the end of that year, Memphis had become one of the most dangerous cities in the country due to a spike in homicides. The bloodshed in Dolph's name was relentless, with many lives lost in the aftermath. Of course, one of the most notable deaths was Big Jook, Yo Gotti's brother. In the ongoing trial, prosecutor Paul Hagerman detailed the long-standing feud between Dolph's label, Paper Route Empire (PRE), and Gotti's CMG, Collective Music Group, formerly Music Group. According to Hagerman, Dolph repeatedly declined lucrative offers from CMG to remain independent, which escalated tensions between the two labels. The prosecution also highlighted a series of violent incidents, including Dolph's 2017 shooting in North Carolina, which inspired his diss track 100 Shots.
100 shots. How the f you miss a whole 100 shots.
Anyways, it's just another roller coaster of a case. Young Dolph was a well-beloved rapper in Memphis, a well-loved guy that actually made efforts to uplift his community. In many ways, he was to Memphis what Nipsey Hussle was to Los Angeles. So to see these guys cut him down in his prime like that, it's understandable seeing people's anger. And for sure, that anger would be reflected in Johnson's time in prison. He should ask other hated guys in prison like Derek Chauvin and R. Kelly.
Derek Chauvin, the man convicted of George Floyd. Now, last week, we had told you that he had been seriously injured after being stabbed in prison.
Anyways, talking about the accused guys generally, apparently it's only Justin Johnson that has been fully convicted after pleading not guilty. As for Cornelius Smith Jr., while he has also been charged with first-degree murder, he is not scheduled for trial on the same day as Justine Johnson, according to his lawyer, Michael Scholl. Apparently, while Hernandez Govan, Justin Johnson, and Cornelius Smith Jr. are on the hook for first-degree murder and were supposed to be on trial together, the opposite happened in court as the trial started. Only Justin Johnson appeared, while Cornelius Smith appeared as a witness instead.
Did you agree to do this hit?
Yes, sir.
Had Justin agreed to do this hit?
Yes, sir.
We all gonna do it together?
Yeah, they been on me to it. Yeah.
Was there any arrangements as far as splitting the money or anything?
Of the four main suspects, the first suspect to plead guilty was Jamarcus Johnson, who wasn't directly involved in the shooting, but was an accessory after the fact. Jamarcus Johnson had previously accepted a plea deal in October 2023 to testify against other defendants, with his deal including pleading guilty to 3 counts of accessory after the fact, and between 6 and 12 years in jail.
Another suspect, Jamarcus Johnson, pled guilty to 3 counts of accessory after the fact in October of 2023, and he faces 6 to 12 years in jail.
Whether that was smart or not is debatable, but if it would lead to a reduced sentence for him, it's understandable seeing him take the deal. A drowning man usually has very little options. Now, after Jamarcus took the deal, Cornelius Smith Jr. followed in his footsteps and flipped the script, apparently facing additional charges of unlawful carrying and possession of a firearm and theft of property. Smith agreed to testify, according to the prosecutor. Even Hernandez Govan, the alleged mastermind, is alleged to also be another one to testify. At this junction, it's apparently only Justin Johnson that didn't flip, and what a world of good that did him. Now, if you come to think of it, that's probably why Hernandez Govan so easily got out on bail. If you can remember, during the second trial delay hearing in May, Govan was out of jail on a $90,000 bond and on house arrest. This was even as he was facing and conspiracy charges, in addition to first-degree.
Continuing that breaking news in Young Dolph's case, Hernandez Govan, one of the prime suspects in the rapper's death, is now out of jail on a $90,000 bond.
Anyway, right now we can only imagine what must be going through Straight Drop's mind. He's heading to prison, and he might spend the rest of his life there. To make matters worse, he gunned down a man who is so loved by the streets. So apparently, for the rest of his life that he might actually have to spend in prison, it's going to be torture. Our advice? He should always sleep with one eye open because you never know. Yo Gotti and CMG definitely can't save him now.